Good morning, YouTube. I'm Rowan, and I'm just rowing along here. Welcome to my latest video, rant, and piece of art, all revolving around, you guessed it, the rich and famous Twitch streamer Hasan. Quick note here that I observed from my last and first ever video that I was speaking pretty fast. I was nervous, since reading from a prepared script isn't something I'm used to. I'm going to try to slow it down for this one, but it might take a while for me to find a comfortable pace. Now, my title is a bit misleading because I actually do believe a socialist millionaire can be an ally. Thing is, though, that's definitely not Hasan, and it's definitely not the grand majority of streamers and YouTubers who claim to be socialist. I'm even a fan of some of these people, but despite what they say, they're definitely not socialist. Honestly, I don't know if there even is a so-called socialist millionaire who puts their money where their mouth is, so it's a totally hypothetical concept, really. If you're watching this, you probably know that a few weeks ago, so-called socialist millionaire Twitch streamer hasan was outed for buying a $3 million house in West Hollywood. If you didn't know that, well, now you've been learned and can follow along with the rest of this video. Hasan obviously came under fire for that, but a lot of people also defended him, and there's a few things I felt I personally noticed in this situation. First of all, is that there's two types of people defending Hasan. Fellow internet millionaires who don't really do anything for their communities with their money, hence have a vested interest in defending Hasan, and people who might not be rich, but definitely aren't struggling, and who have fully drank the internet pseudo-socialist Kool-Aid, so they also have a vested interest in defending Hasan. I noticed something on the opposition too, though. Mainly, I noticed that the opposition was pretty tame. Other than Destiny, actually. He went back to this topic in a stream, and I liked what he had to say. Other than that, though, sure, people were memeing, and it hurt poor Hasan's little millionaire feelings, but very little of it was the hardcore criticism he treated it as. I think the reason for that is, people just didn't really feel like it was their place to go all out on him, because whatever their previous backgrounds might be, they're all fairly well off now, so roasting Hasan over an open flame on behalf of the poor and working class probably felt a little uncomfortable and distasteful. That's where I come in, friends. I'm completely comfortable with fanning the flames of this drama because I'm poor as heck, so I feel I'm in the perfect position to criticize Hasan because I'm exactly the type of person he acts like he speaks for and claims he wants better for. Hence why the thumbnail of this video says, "You don't speak for us," because he doesn't, and this video is going to explore why. So, to get into the meat of this rant, I'm going to watch the Schön presents Hasan Piker video, and I'm pretty sure it's Schön and not Scon, but feel free to correct me. Anyway, I've found this video to be ridiculously cringe and self-promotional, even just from random clips I've come across. I'm going to link it below, rather than put it in this video, because I don't really want this to be a straight up reaction or anything, it's more of a video essay. I honestly don't know how anyone takes this guy seriously. Even on a surface level, it's kind of ridiculous. Here's this Twitch multimillionaire who's never had to struggle financially, basking in the privilege and influence of his wealth, with a haircut and outfit that probably costs more than all my monthly expenses combined, telling you and me that we need to go out onto the streets and we need to bring the revolution when people like him are the ones with all the money and influence. Even outside of this video, I don't know how anyone can look at his trendy designer clothes and all his bling while listening to him talk about and for the economically destitute and not just feel a mixture of unease and amusement. There's so much cognitive dissonance, not only in his presentation, but in his audience's responses to him as a persona, that I don't even know where I'm going to begin. I mean, for example, does anyone really believe this was made to inspire and encourage people, and not just to further his brand? Looking at it now, the dislike ratio is insane, so I hope even his audience knows this is a bunch of self-promotional bullcrap. It's just a shame they don't realize the same can be said for everything else Hasan does. If anything, this is a perfect representation of his brand and who he really is as a person. And those are just my initial thoughts from the little clips I've seen. Now I'm going to sit down, watch the whole thing, and note down my thoughts within the context of this man having just bought a house in West Hollywood for $3 million, probably one of the most 1%er status purchases anyone can achieve. Get ready for some harsh criticism, because I expect this to make me pretty mad. And yes, I know one of his deflections against critics is lol lol they mad, but honestly, that just shows what a hypocrite he is. I thought anger against the rich was justified, Hasan, especially from the lower class. I thought we're meant to eat the rich and make the rich pay. I'm just following your order, comrade. Well, anyway, I'm gonna go watch this now. Okay, so after watching the whole thing for the first time, I literally had to Google, is Schön magazine a parody? And I'm still not sure if this is real. How disconnected from reality and from the actual struggle of the working class do you have to be to think any of this was a good idea? I feel like I'm watching a South Park bit, yet according to everything I can find, this isn't parody. It's a legitimate fashion magazine that thought this was a good mode of promotion, and Hasan legitimately thought doing this collab would be a good look. As the meme goes, I just cannot even, dude. As for the actual content of the video, obviously it's a bunch of hypocritical nonsense that just sounds like he's talking about himself. But I guess that's pretty much what I expected. He talks about the Kardashians not being real life, as if his life is any more real than theirs, as if a Hollywood lifestyle with a $3 million house and private pool is an easily achievable reality for anyone else. Even as Twitch streamer success stories go, he's the fortunate minority, not the norm or average. The man lives in as much a bubble and echo chamber as everyone he criticizes in this video. Both the individuals, such as Donald Trump and the Kardashians, and the groups and concepts, such as the American higher class and cultural imperialism. The fact he thinks he's exempt from this cultural imperialism and not part of it is hilarious and sad to me. He can't really believe that, right? He can't really believe that he's separate from the mainstream, can he? Or that he's counterculture? It blows my mind to think he might actually believe that. He's one of the most popular streamers on Twitch, for God's sake. And here he is collabing with a big fashion magazine. Just because you're not on TV doesn't mean you're counterculture, especially not in current year with how so-called new media has become just as influential as traditional media. So I counted it, and there's technically 2 outfit changes in this video. I thought they were free, so that's at least one less than I first assumed. Still, these outfit changes highlight something important. Yes, this is a fashion magazine, but that's the whole point. Why is a so-called socialist working with a fashion magazine in the first place? It just shows what his politics really are to him. It's fashion, it's aesthetic, it's not real and has no substance. If it were real, he'd be doing something more worthwhile with his money than buying a mansion in West Hollywood to match his fashion magazine profile. And not to look too deep into something, but one of these outfits gives off a very cultish aesthetic, with this bright white hooded robe and white background. Obviously, I'm not saying he's a cult leader, it's just very telling if this is how he views himself, as this kind of enlightened figure bestowing wisdom upon the masses via fashion magazine advertisements. On a side note, it's mind-blowing to me that this was released 3 years ago, yet he's only really been called out by a large number of people for being an obvious grifter recently. And honestly, I think he's always been a grifter. I don't think any of this has ever had meaning to him. Maybe it had meaning once, as an intellectual exercise, the way a lot of privileged people view these things, sometimes without even realizing. But I don't think real social change has ever been an actual goal for Hasan. If it was, he'd be using his capital and influence to enact real change. Instead, he puts that responsibility on his audience. And why wouldn't he? The whole point of structural change for a socialist mindset is for there to be less class disparity, less unfair distribution of wealth, less of a rich ruling class. Why would he want that when he benefits from the system being the way it is, when he's literally everything he claims to stand against? He says in this video that he wants to tackle some of the biggest problems our generation has faced. And I wonder if he, on any level, realizes he's part of that problem. A financially privileged person who already didn't have to fight or struggle for anything, earning millions literally for sitting on his butt and talking out of the side of his mouth. And yes, adding to what he calls the cultural imperialism of America. He implies he's an intellectual by claiming the battle against intellectual thought is another one of the biggest problems we've seen in our age. Ignoring the fact people have been saying this about every society they've existed in since the conception of civilization, that he considers himself an intellectual in the first place is laughable. I don't think I've ever heard Hasan voice an opinion that wasn't just regurgitated from someone smarter than him, unless it was to save face. All the defenses he has for his wealth and how he navigates it, for instance, those are definitely his own unique thoughts, and they're definitely not intellectual. They're basic and overly defensive, like calling people mad or exaggerating what people are saying by claiming his critics want him to be poor and not to own any property, as if there isn't a huge difference between making sure you and your family are taken care of and buying a mega expensive property in one of the most bougie areas in the whole world. Also, I'm sorry if this comes across as overly mean, but look, he can cry into his millions. Hasan, if you're such a forward-thinking intellectual, please close your mouth. I don't know what it is with these socialist dude bro streamers where they have their mouths hanging open with a dead-eyed stare to match, but it's not even slightly flattering. Please close your mouth. Okay, I'm sorry, I had to say it. It legitimately drives me nuts. Immature criticisms aside, let's get back to addressing his actual words. He repeats himself a lot in this video, basically using different phrases to all say the war against intellectual thought. One thing that is different though is him mentioning a war against rational behavior. Oh, you mean like claiming to be a socialist and for the people, but then collabing with a fashion magazine to make a flashy self-promo? Or how about calling yourself a socialist and claiming to care about economic disparity, then buying a $3 million mansion and getting defensive and whiny when people point out how hypocritical this is? That kind of irrational behavior? Man, this video is just sending me. The funniest part of this has to be that after his spiel about a war on intellectualism, he then claims that we're not even aware of it, as if he himself has any self-awareness. My brain is just melting at this point, and I'm only 34 seconds in. Thank God this video is just over a minute long. Hasan asks, what kind of an example are we setting? I don't know, Hasan. You tell me. What kind of an example are you setting right now? Literally no self-awareness. Either that, or he's just purposely obtuse. I don't know which is worse, but this video hasn't aged well at all. Everything he says in this video can be applied to himself. Culture is the backbone of the resistance, he states, and that all it seeks to do now is sedate the masses. That's you, Hasan. You're talking about yourself and your audience. You're talking about flexing all this gear and buying ridiculously high-priced property, then ranting to your audience about why it's okay when you do it, that you're not like those other shallow rich people. I want this video to be over so bad right now, you have no idea. Especially since he's now talking about this sedative culture and how it appeals to your base needs and primal urges. That's still you, Hasan. Stop projecting, or maybe just stop grifting. I have no idea what he was thinking. I really don't. The end of this video is definitely my favorite part, and not just because it's the end. It talks about how you can bring the positive change you want to see in this world. That's right, you can. Not him, not any of his rich friends, but you, the person who probably has nothing. You have to take the revolution to the streets while he hides in his mansion and does nothing of worth to further his supposed ideologies. But my favorite part here, my biggest, most favorite part, is him bringing up the quote, "The revolution will not be televised." I've heard this quote a few times. The other most recent time I heard it in my memory was actually from Alex Jones a long time ago. I've never been able to shake off the feeling that this quote is being misused or exploited in some way, because I never knew its source, which is honestly a huge shame now that I look into it. Seeing it in this video, though, encouraged me to go ahead and do some light research. What I learned, and this probably isn't news to a lot of people, is that the quote, "The revolution will not be televised," was first publicized in a poem by a lyricist named Gil Scott-Heron, an African-American man who wrote about the social and political struggles he and the black community of his generation faced. Before that, it was a popular slogan of the Black Power movement in the 1960s. I don't know about you potentially listening to this, but I find this pretty exploitative. Something tells me Gil Scott-Heron and the political activists of his time weren't intending to have their slogan used by millionaires to further their brand. It definitely wasn't meant for grifters like Alex Jones and Hassan B to pose for their audience, though I find it pretty fitting that both men, from starkly different ideological positions, have exploited this exact phrase in the same way. This leaves us with a few possibilities. The first is that Hassan didn't know the source of the quote either, and just thought it sounded cool and would make him look cool. The second is that he knew the origin of the quote and simply didn't care about appropriating it for his flashy fashion magazine self-promo because it sounded neat and would make him look cool. Now, since he keeps claiming he's an intellectual, I guess I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and assume he does know the origin of the quote and just didn't care about exploiting it in such a way. Now, I'm not African American and I'm not even American, so I can't speak from a personal perspective on the usage of this phrase as someone with a cultural link to those communities. I can only speak to my own sensibilities and ethics, and I, personally, wouldn't take a quote like this one to use for the furthering of my own brand on social media. I'd find that to be pretty disingenuous and immoral. How you feel about it is entirely up to you. For me, though, it kind of reminds me of the recent Fortnite MLK shenanigans, except at least Fortnite seemed to be coming from a genuine, if not misguided place. For Hassan, on the other hand, it's all about reinforcing his edgy socialist image for profit. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, just search Fortnite and MLK together, because this video isn't about that, and I don't want to veer off. Not gonna lie here, that was the longest 1 minute and 20 seconds of my entire life, and I watched it twice, because the first time was just an assault on the senses. On my first watch, I didn't pay much attention, because I was just getting a feel for it, and there were so many flashy cuts going on, but the second watch was pure hell. I'd been putting this off all day because I knew it'd be like feeding my brain into a meat grinder, and I apologize for that visceral image, but that's really how it felt. I basically just experienced Pink Floyd's The Wall in like under 2 minutes. With that out of the way, I can get to my closing statement, which addresses the idea of a socialist millionaire in general. I believe in practicing what you preach, and I believe that if you have a certain ideology, that ideology is nothing but intellectual exercise and social roleplay unless you're willing to somehow assimilate it into your lifestyle. Hassan buying a free mill mansion, then acting as though it doesn't take away from his message because he lives in a capitalist society, is not in any way the same as your average Joe criticizing capitalism but owning an iPhone, or a worker criticizing capitalism but owning property. And I'm pretty sure he knows this. He's being intellectually dishonest for the sake of avoiding criticism so he can have his cake and eat it too. Fact of the matter is, there's plenty he could do as a literal one percenter to further his supposed socialist goals, or even to make life easier for the poor and disenfranchised in his community and country. For example, if you're going to buy a $3 million house, why not then give a measly $1 million to properly vetted groups and charities that work towards creating and finding affordable housing for the lower class, or for housing the homeless? This is a very minor and easily implemented action he could invest in without harming his lifestyle at all. The fact it doesn't even occur to him shows you what his ideology really is, and it's not socialism, it's the almighty dollar. It's him for his own self, the worst kind of capitalism there is. Hassan says, make the rich pay. And to that I say, great idea, Hassan, let's start with you. Might as well lead by example, right? I mean, that is what you said in this video, because words are just words. We're all beholden to the limits of our capitalist society. That's very true. What's also true in a capitalist society is that money talks. Hassan, who often speaks about and for the disenfranchised on his streams, has the biggest voice out of all of us because of his wealth. To act in denial of that is just intellectually dishonest, which is funny coming from someone who claims there's a battle against intellectual thought going on. He should put that wealth to good use, or just shut up about politics and become a Fortnite streamer. I doubt it'll even affect his brand, because I don't think his audience really wants socialism either. The aesthetic of it is just trendy and cool. I can't tell you the amount of trust fund kids I've met who have their parents pay them through college and university and love the idea of socialism and taking care of the economically destitute, up until a poor person has a contrary opinion or expects them to live out their ideals, then they've got nothing to say. Anyway, I could probably speak more on this topic, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm completely drained. So for now, I'm putting it to rest. I think I've pretty much demonstrated how Hasan is in fact a hypocrite by utilizing his own words against him. He tells his audience to fight for change and set an example while doing nothing to change things himself, despite having more influence and power than most people could ever dream of. If anyone should be striving to set an example, it should be Hasan. His wealth gives him a level of opportunity that's unimaginable for the average person, yet he places the responsibility for change onto average people, when he should be spearheading the movement if he cares about it so much. The reasonable conclusion to draw here is that he just doesn't care. To send us off, I do have a little treat for anyone actually viewing this. I've written down an exhaustive list of socialist-based backhanded terms that we can and should call Hasan and other socialist millionaires. You know, ones similar to Socialist Millionaire and what have you. A few of these are tried and true, old favorites, but others are ones I made up myself. So, thanks for watching. Remember to like or dislike, leave a comment, subscribe, and definitely check out my Ko-Fi, where you can commission art from me or make a donation if you're feeling super generous. I've been Rowan, and I'm just gonna row on out of here with my list. To start with, there's of course Socialist Millionaire, then Trust Fund Socialist, Frat Boy Socialist, Champagne Socialist, obviously, Twitch Socialist, Armchair Socialist, Dude Bro Socialist, Influencer Socialist, Aesthetic Socialist, Grifter Socialist, Kool-Aid Socialist, Internet Socialist, Blue Check Socialist for the verified socialists, Discord Socialist, Reddit Socialist, Bootlicker Socialist. This one is great, I think. Love it. 1% Socialist, Patreon Socialist, YouTube Socialist, another obvious one, but a goodie. Might as well throw Twitter Socialist in there too, of course. Coca-Cola Socialist. This one made me laugh. Revenue Socialist for the ad revs. Pseudo-Socialist. Trendy Socialist. Mainstream Socialist. Wannabe Socialist and Fake Socialist. Little obvious, but they should still be included, I think. Then, of course, there's Poser Socialist or Poseur Socialist. Real Estate Socialist for these people's huge freaking houses. Meme Socialist. Socialite Socialist. Vanity Fair Socialist. Bougie Socialist. LOL Socialist or Omega LOL Socialist or Omega Socialist. I think that's my favorite because in kink communities, an Omega is a man who takes it from all the other men. Let's see here. Credit Card Socialist. Suburban Socialist. Nike Socialist. MTV Socialist. Selfie Socialist. iPhone Socialist. Algorithm Socialist. Status Quo Socialist. Rent a Socialist or Rent a Cop Socialist. Socialist Bro or Bro Socialist or Bro-Socialist.